Joe McMoneagle is one of the most prominent and successful member of the clandestine remote viewing program through U.S. Army intelligence and the Stanford Research Institute that went by many nicknames, including the Stargate Project between 1978 and 1995. Born in 1946, he became the U.S. Army Chief Warrant Officer in the 1960s and served in Vietnam, where he was severely injured in a helicopter crash, and it led to his joining Army intelligence, where his talents were discovered and honed. Through the Stargate program, he contributed to the remote viewing revealing facts about Chinese nuclear facilities, the Iranian hostage crisis, the Red Brigades, and Mohammad Gaddafi. He also became the remote viewer responsible for identifying the structures of Cydonia on the planet Mars through remote sensing, including intelligent beings, 1 million years ago. A skill set primarily intended for spying purposes against the Soviet Union and other enemies of the United States, his talent and interest ultimately led him to explore near-death experiences, out-of-body travel, and the unexplained phenomena of UFOs, UAPs, and extraterrestrial biological entities. They all seem related in ways we're still discovering little by little, thanks to the talent and disclosure work of men like Joe McMoneagle. Upon retiring from the intelligence service, Joe has traveled and lectured on his remote viewing experiences, and this 1990s clip comes to us courtesy of Arias Hypnosis and was suggested by one of Project Blue Book's avid listeners. It affords us the privilege of meeting Joe McMoneagle on his own terms as we continue to collect interviews of this caliber for the benefit of search and discovery of truths regarding unexplained phenomena and for future preservation. Let's listen to Joe McMoneagle.
Being a remote viewer, I don't get to pick and choose my targets. I never did, because I'm blind to them. You know, they just happen. So I'm as mystified by the results of my remote viewing as is anyone else. They're always a surprise to me. So when I go in and do a remote viewing, whatever happens, happens. The other part of denying the ego is that you never try to understand what's happening, you never try to classify what's happening, or you certainly never try to judge or come to some conclusion about your data. You just go with it because it's not your job. One of the things I learned a long time ago is that that's somebody else's job to figure out what it is you said or figure out what it is you meant. There's some other things in a minute that you'll see, and I'll explain to you why that's important. Or the data will explain to you why that's important. The Clearwater, Missouri, March 27, 1973 UFO sighting occurred in a dam and reservoir area. It's kind of an interesting sighting because there were a lot of things going on, and somebody suggested that it be targeted by remote viewers, I guess. I don't know who suggested it or why, but it wound up being one of our training targets. And I don't know who else might have targeted or didn't, but this is my result of that targeting. That's the dam area. The red lines are basically my perceptual area. So imagine, in a remote viewing sense, me standing on the dam, and that would be my view as a remote viewer looking away from the dam. And my first perception was an object moving that way, a light, big light, about the size of a small aircraft carrier. My second perception was a whole bunch of lights arriving and then imploding, not exploding, but imploding. 4 of them arrived on a mountaintop and then imploded. I was very specific about that. So I had a sense that they just kind of arrived together and imploded. Very strange. Next perception was another aircraft carrier went by from right to left. big, bright, white aircraft carrier, size light. Third impression was the arrival of two big circular lights that came together in the form of a figure eight and kind of wobbled there, doing a dance. And at that point, my monitor suggested that I join it. That sounded like a pretty good idea. I said, okay, lights are kind of interesting. I think I'll just kind of slip one out there and see what the light's all about. At which point I had an out-of-body. It's just like being snapped right on my body. Bang. And I found myself sitting in a white cube. Perfectly white cube. Opaque, very bright, with no windows or doors. Just a pure white cube. And no way to get out. And no way of knowing how I got in. So I started looking for a seam or a door or a window, and couldn't seem to find one. So I thought, oh, time to go back to my body now. And nothing happened. Oops. Started getting nervous. Being basically very curious, I kept looking and started getting more nervous, at which time a apparition of my father beamed in, you know, like in Star Trek, beamed in. Problem is my father had been dead about 2 years, and he, in a very gruff voice, pointed his hand over my shoulder. Leave. You don't belong here. And I went, nice try. Whoever you are, it is not going to work. Because my dad's never raised his voice to me. My mother did, but not my dad. And my dad looked very confused for a moment and then beamed out. And I started looking a lot harder for the seam. And then these two light beings appeared, or one light being appeared. It looked very humanoid in shape. It had no face, just a light outline. And it folded into two of itself. And my perception was it was arguing with itself. And that really made me feel uncomfortable. And it raised an appendage, and a light beam shot out of its appendage and hit me in the chest. And I felt a moment of panic. And then I said, I got angry. And I said, get out of here. I'm tired of this. And it argued some more and winked out. And I started hammering on the side of this box, this cube. And then stood there thinking, this is too bizarre. And then I had a sense that something reached inside my chest and started feeling around. Messing around inside my chest. And you know when you strum a guitar string with your nail? Well, something found a nerve inside me and strummed it, and I was instantly, violently ill, like I was going to projectile vomit. That's when I sat bolt upright in my body and collided heads with my monitor. And we're both running around a remote viewing room holding our heads. And we terminated a remote viewing session because we didn't know what was going on. So that's the remote viewing event. Total time was 15 minutes. Felt like an hour. And I haven't a clue what was going on at that particular remote viewing site. I do know that was definitely multidimensional. It was not what I call a classic UFO event. In May of 1984 at the Monroe Institute, I had been training with Bob for almost 14 months learning to control my out-of-body experiences. I had had spontaneous out-of-bodies for many years, and Bob had been training with me in his lab at the last year of my time at the project, Stargate project, to teach me to control my out-of-bodies. I wanted to see if controlled out-of-bodies were better at producing information, collection information, than remote viewing. It turns out you can do very specific things with out-of-bodies that you can't do with remote viewing, but I don't think it's as good. If you want to know how the trigger mechanism works on a Chinese nuclear weapon, out-of-body's better, because you can go to the Chinese nuclear weapon, put your face in it, look around, do detailed drawing. But if you want to know where all the parts from the weapon came from, remote viewing is better, because all the parts are intricately linked together, data-wise. So things are different for how you want to do things. In any event, during that period, my training officer, Skip Atwater, would come in from the project and test me to see whether or not my remote viewing was getting any better. And one of his tests that he brought, one of the training tests that he brought, was a target that I didn't know anything about. Normally I did mundane targets, like quasi-military targets.